On our newscast tonight, Washington's top nuclear envoy visits Seoul and repeats that Pyongyang must display sincerity towards denuclearization before any talks can begin. A special police division dedicated to sex crime investigation will be set up in Korea next year. It's in response to a number of respected high-profile men being accused of sex abuse offenses. The maiden launch of NASA's Orion deep space capsule is foiled by wind, gust, and sticky fuel valves. Officials will make another attempt on Friday. We have these and more coming up next on Early Edition at 6.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to our newscast at 6 p.m. on December 5th here in Korea. I'm Na-hyun Gyo.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. Washington's top nuclear envoy, Sung Kim, is in Seoul for talks with his South Korean counterpart, Hwang Joon-kook.
Well, he is indeed, and much of the talk, as you can imagine, is focused on North Korea and its nuclear program. Our Lee Ji-yoon has more on what Kim said about the long-stalled six-party nuclear talks.
Washington is not lowering the bar for restarting nuclear talks. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sung Kim says the fate of the stalled six-party talks depends on Pyongyang.
It would be a mistake for us to rush back to negotiations unless we can have some confidence that the North Koreans are ready to work with us in a sincere and serious manner towards complete verifiable denuclearization.
The former U.S. ambassador to South Korea met with the South Korean counterpart Hwang Joon-kook on Friday in Seoul. There, Kim said the U.S. wants to resume negotiations and that its diplomatic doors are open to North Korea, but that the North has refused to walk through them. The meeting between the nuclear envoys from Seoul and Washington follows a visit by North Korean Special Envoy Choi Ryong-hae to Russia last month. There, Che reportedly said Pyongyang was ready to resume the talks on its nuclear program without preconditions. Next week, Kim will travel to Japan and China, both participants of the six-party talks, to discuss the North Korean issue once again. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
And not only nuclear, but also military threats from North Korea are still very present on the Korean peninsula. One of the latest examples is the sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan by Pyongyang in 2010. Now, next March will mark the 5th anniversary, and Cheonan has or are now being used for educational purposes. Choi Yu-sun reports.
Inside a park at the South Korean Navy 2nd Fleet headquarters south of Seoul now stands what remains of the Cheonan warship, which was torpedoed by North Korea nearly 5 years ago. A $6 million project has placed the 1,200-ton vessel here from a nearby dock to show the very appearance of the Cheonan, cut into two pieces after the attack on March 26, 2010, which claimed the lives of 46 South Korean sailors. Visitors can get a wider view of the area atop a 4-story high observatory and listen to the details of the tragedy before paying tribute to the sailors in front of a monument.
The exhibition will become a sign of protecting our country, where a will for a victorious fight will be imprinted in the officers, and people will be reminded about the value of security.
In a bid to turn the painful memory into an opportunity to educate people about security, officials plan to build an additional memorial hall next year.
I was heartbroken when we had to say goodbye to our children, but I'm thankful that the government has made efforts not to forget them.
Some 830,000 Koreans and foreigners have visited the Cheonan since it was displayed at the fleet's dock soon after the attack. Now, the story of the ill-fated vessel can be told to more visitors at its new home. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
We maintain our focus at the sea. We remain seaboard for now. We have been seeing too many illegal Chinese fishing activities in Korean waters, and the government is looking on ways to crack down on such activities. Members of the ruling Century Party and government ministries convened on Friday to discuss the issue. They reviewed plans to confiscate fish that are illegally caught and discard the Chinese fishing boats used to catch them. Also discussed was the possibility of boosting the budget of the Korea Coast Guard and increasing the number of officers. Those at the meeting also found common ground on the need to strengthen cooperation with China and North Korea. Hundreds of Chinese fishermen are arrested every year for illegally fishing in Korean waters, and sometimes they react violently when their vessels are boarded by Coast Guard officials. A college professor in Seoul was recently detained on charges of sexually assaulting dozens of his students over the years. There are also allegations that the head of the Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra sexually harassed her employees. It's developments like these that have left the police no choice but to roll up their sleeves. Our Connie Lee has this next report.
It's being seen as a new push in the fight against sexual abuse here in Korea. The National Police Agency has announced that a special division will be set up next year solely dedicated to investigating sexual abuse allegations. The agency says it wants to reduce the number of cases here in the nation and strengthen investigations into victims' reports. This announcement comes amid a recent string of sexual abuse and harassment cases involving some high-profile men. Just this past Wednesday, a professor at Seoul National University was detained on charges of sexually harassing his intern. A professor at Korea University, another prestigious school, recently resigned after accusations he sexually abused a student. And a former prosecutor general is also under the spotlight for allegedly molesting a female employee at a country club. It's merely a small sample size, as many cases are believed to go unreported.
The victims this time were brave enough to stand up against these powerful men. The media attention on this is positive and hopefully signals a change in how Korea deals with sexual abuse, especially involving high-profile people.
The National Police Agency's latest plans shows its determination to combat sexual abuse. Earlier this year, the agency set up a special task force in well over 100 regions throughout Korea to investigate sexual abuse cases. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The Korean economy heavily relies on exports, and the vast majority of those exports are manufactured goods. But with increasing global competition, President Park says the manufacturing sector needs innovation, and that's exactly what she will support. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Despite the sluggish global economy, Korea is expected to post record numbers in trade surplus, exports, and trade volume this year. In fact, Korea has already breached the $1 trillion mark in annual trade for the fourth straight year. But what's more surprising is that it's not just the country's largest conglomerates that are leading the rise, it's also small and mid-sized companies. The pace of export growth among smaller firms is more than 3 times faster than that of large companies. While expressing gratitude to local exporters, President Park emphasized during a speech marking the nation's 51st trade day that they cannot simply rest on their laurels.
이를 위해서 수출의 근간인 제조업을 IT와 융합하는 제조업 혁신 3.0 전략을 적극 추진해서 산업 부문의 창조 경제를 구현해야 합니다.
To do this, President Park pledged to cut red tape, support startups in the manufacturing sector, and support research and development for new growth engines. Park added that the government will foster the growth of 400 companies so they can become global players with exports of more than $100 million a year by the year 2017.
수출 경험이 없는 기업들이 손쉽게 해외 시장의 문을 두드릴 수 있도록 전문 무역 상사를 통한 간접 수출을 지원하고 전자 상거래 수출을 활성화하겠습니다.
President Park also asked companies to actively utilize Korea's free trade deals with various countries. This year, Korea reached agreement on FTAs with China, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the economy is worried to be on a path toward deflation, but people are apparently not really feeling consumer prices go down. The Korea Rural Economic Institute says consumers felt like prices closely linked to everyday grocery items rose 14% from the previous year. This is based on a survey conducted on more than 6,000 people. And the institute says this is the second consecutive year with two-digit growth.
Starting next year, Ikea will stop selling a world map that refers to the body of water between Korea and Japan only by the Japanese name, ahead of the opening of its first store in Korea this month. Swedish furniture giant says it has decided to leave the map off its global product lineup. The map caused quite a stir here in Korea, as it refers to the sea as Sea of Japan and doesn't include the Korean name East Sea. The company explained the map was not intended to be used as an educational tool and apologized to those who might have been offended.
Business Park now face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Most patent battles between the world's two biggest tech giants have been dropped everywhere except for the U.S. Samsung says the almost $1 billion fine it has been ordered to pay is too much and is asking an appeals court to reverse the decision earlier made. Shin Se-min has more.
Samsung Electronics wants a U.S. appeals court to throw out an earlier court's order that it pay Apple $930 million for infringing on iPhone patents when it made its Galaxy range of smart devices. Stressing the design and the look of the company's devices are different from iPhones, Samsung's lawyer Caitlin Sullivan said the damages award was excessive and unwarranted. Making the Korean company's case at the U.S. District Court in California on Thursday, Sullivan said the lower court was wrong to decide Apple's design patents were infringed upon because the Samsung devices do not carry an Apple logo, do not have a home button, and the speaker spots are in different places. She said it was absurd to make Samsung pay Apple its total profit for the Galaxy devices, likening it to giving back the entire profits on a car just because it infringed another automaker's cup holder. Apple's attorney, William Lee, dismissed Samsung's argument and said the $930 million award was fair. Reports say the three judges did not indicate when they would reach their decision. The massive award to Apple is the largest set in any of the so-called smartphone wars. The patent lawsuit between Apple and Samsung began back in 2007 and has rumbled on for years. Samsung and Apple agreed in the summer to drop their patent litigation outside of the U.S., though they have yet to settle their broader dispute. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The Japanese yen has dropped to a new low, all the way down to the psychologically important 120 mark against a greenback for the first time in more than 7 years. The yen tumbled to as low as 120.25 before pulling back a little to close at 119.78 in New York on Thursday. The Japanese currency has been on a downward spiral for months, particularly since the Bank of Japan announced new stimulus measures to boost the economy in October. So far this year, the yen has fallen over 13% against the dollar. The yen also fell 0.7% against the euro on Thursday. Toyota Motor Corporation has said it will call back 190,000 more cars to replace potentially defective airbags. These bags were made by Takata, and the company has so far resisted a nationwide recall called by a U.S. safety agency. Some 14 million vehicles of 10 different brands, including Ford, Hyundai, and Toyota, have been recalled worldwide, with exploding driver's side airbags attributing to 5 deaths and about 140 injuries so far. 8 million of these cars are in the U.S., and Mazda now says the company will expand the recall to additional states as well. Calling it an unprecedented crisis, Japan's regulator reportedly said it may need to change its recall system for an improved response.
Mostly peaceful yet massive protests are growing in the U.S. over the latest grand jury decision in New York not to press charges against a white police officer who ended up killing an unarmed black man through a chokehold. New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio says policing has to change. Have a listen.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives. It's what we still have to aspire to.
Now, in light of this incident, NYPD Police Commissioner William Bratton says a 3-day program will start this month, during which some 22,000 police officers will undergo training on street tactics, such as presenting a non-judgmental posture in addition to the usual firearms training. The protests in New York are reigniting the controversy and divide between police and the African-American community in the U.S. as it comes only a couple of weeks after the situation in Ferguson, Missouri calmed a bit over the Michael Brown case. Earlier from Washington, President Barack Obama said, quote, "Too many Americans feel a deep unfairness when it comes to the gap between professional ideals and how laws are applied on a day-to-day basis." Many were looking forward to Thursday's launch of the Orion space shuttle in the U.S., NASA's first spacecraft in more than a generation. But gusty winds followed by technical glitches have forced officials to postpone the launch by a day. Kim Ji-yeon has more on this story.
The launch of the Orion space capsule from Cape Canaveral in the U.S. state of Florida was called off just 4 minutes before scheduled takeoff due to technical problems. They were detected in the batteries of the rocket's camera and the valves of the shuttle's water supply. A spokesperson from NASA told AFP that it tried for several hours to fix the problems, but were unable to, forcing the launch to be postponed until Friday morning. The launch of Orion is highly anticipated by the space community. It would mark the first time in more than 40 years NASA has launched a craft designed to carry astronauts deep into space. Orion is planned to fly an altitude of 5,800 kilometers, circle the Earth's orbit 2 times in 4.5 hours, and land near waters of Baja California, west of Mexico. Through the test run, NASA will carry out a number of measurements that will be crucial in scheduling a manned spaceflight in the future. A crowd of 26,000 people gathered at the Kennedy Space Center to watch the Orion launch and left disappointed about the delay, but they will get another shot to see history again in the coming hours. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, an American hostage held by al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen says his life is in danger. The militant group has denounced what it calls American crimes against the Muslim world and has threatened to kill the hostage by the end of the week if their demands are not met. Our Son Jung-in has more.
In a 3-minute video posted by al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula on Thursday, the terror group's leader threatened to kill an American hostage, claiming the U.S. had committed crimes against the Muslim world. Nasser bin Ali Al-Lansi gave the U.S. 3 days to meet unspecified demands that he said Washington was aware of.
We give the American government a time frame of 3 days from the issuance of this statement to meet our demands, about which they are aware. Otherwise, the American hostage held by us will meet his inevitable fate.
Soon after the statement, Luke Summers, a British-born American, appears in the footage, pleading for the U.S. government to save his life. The 33-year-old photojournalist was kidnapped last September in the Yemeni capital Sana'a while working for the Yemen Times.
My name is Luke Summers. It's now been well over a year since I was kidnapped in Sana'a. Basically, I'm looking for any help that can get me out of this situation. I'm certain that my life is in danger.
The threat comes more than a week after a rescue attempt by the United States Yemeni mission freed 8 hostages kidnapped by al-Qaeda's Yemen branch. During the joint operation, however, the military is known to have failed to locate other 5 hostages, including Mr. Summers. 손정인, Arirang News.
Well, we may not feel the difference in our everyday lives, but the fact of the matter is global temperatures are rising. So what can and should be done to mitigate the impact of climate change? That's the question being tackled at UN climate talks in Peru. Our Kwon So-hwa reports.
November 2013. Typhoon Haiyan slams into the Philippines, killing more than 6,000 people and turning the lives of millions of others upside down. Now, another super typhoon is bringing back memories of last year's nightmare. Typhoon Ruby is forecast to make landfall within the next 2 days. It's superstorms like Ruby that are sounding alarm bells worldwide about the effects of climate change. It is a major topic of conversation at UN climate negotiations in Peru.
When we were in Doha, it was Typhoon Bhopal. When we were in Warsaw, it was Typhoon Haiyan. And now that we are here in Lima, we are facing Typhoon Ruby, which is also a Category 4 super typhoon. We need you to get your acts together to meaningfully respond to the urgency of climate action.
Many experts agree that global warming intensifies extreme weather events. That's why the biggest major climate conference this year aims to set a long-term treaty to keep global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It's part of the global push to reduce carbon emissions, with extra pressure being exerted on the world's 2 worst polluters, China and the United States. At the UN General Assembly Thursday, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon welcomed new pledges out of Beijing, Washington, and the EU, including Germany, to cut emissions.
Next year is an opportunity to take big steps, transformative steps in the right direction. We must do all it takes to provide hope for people and the planet.
Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. A cold wave alert remains in effect for Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, while a heavy snowfall alert has been issued for the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do and Jeollabuk-do provinces, where up to 7 centimeters are expected through noon tomorrow. Now, a dry weather warning and advisories are expected to be issued at 8 o'clock this evening. Most of the warnings are expected to go on the east side of the peninsula in Gangwon-do province. Now, these cold conditions will stick around through the weekend, with a cold snap sweeping the country, hovering near the freezing point during the day. However, it looks like the skies will be mostly clear and sunny nationwide. And to our readings for tomorrow, so we'll start off the Saturday morning at -8 in the morning, and before reaching up to 0 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will top to 4 and 6 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions such as Jeju Island will peak up to 7. Dokdo hits lower at 1, while Nongkeugang be reaching down to -10 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park. Now, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
so beautiful.
I'm telling you, pororo is everywhere, even Christmas ornaments. Well, that does it for us this week. Have a great start to your day, depending on where you're watching from. And if you're in Korea, stay warm and drive safely. And of course, don't party or work too hard. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye for now.